Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast. Darren Mitchell here, and another very special guest all the way from Tennessee in the United States, by way of New Jersey, then New York City, and now settled in Tennessee. Mr. Jason Yarusi, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Darren. Great to be here.
And we're just talking before that, we're just talking a little bit about New York City and how my wife and I were there in 1997 and just the sheer size of the place. I don't think a lot of people get a sense, unless you've been to a city like New York City, just how big some of these cities can be. It's just unbelievable. How did you find it?
So funny enough, I left college with a finance degree, and I had no interest going into anything to do with business or finance. I had some loss early on in my high school years, and it left me really lacking a lot of confidence. I really didn't have any drive because I had lost a couple of friends and a girlfriend, and when I got this degree, it was because a friend's mom said you should just do a business degree. So I was really not making some great choices at the time. And I moved into New York City because I was like, okay, I got to do something. And so the impetus was, get out of where I was in New Jersey, where I was living too. And from there, then move into the part of living in New York City. So I moved into New York City. And at the time, I just started working in odd jobs in bars and restaurants. And on that front, it allowed to just start experiencing a lot of things. But one thing I wasn't experiencing was just living a happy life. Doing things where, just working bar job to bar job. Like it wasn't fun. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't what I wanted to do, but it was all I had in front of me and felt like all I was worth. And just, I hated what I was doing. I despised like the steps I had set myself up with. I was blaming everyone around me. I was putting fingers at, my upbringing, my parents, like you just name anything, I would have blamed it. Right. Well, one night I'm leaving the bar 2:33 in the morning. I'd rode my bicycle to work. And so I got on my bicycle, and instead of riding around Manhattan where there's a path, I was like, oh, I'll just ride across the city tonight. Cause I just was so angry with the day. I just wanted to get home. Well, I ride all the way across Manhattan, about 10 avenues, make a right down 2nd Avenue, and out of nowhere, a flash light comes here, and I'm flying in the air because I just gotten hit by a car.
Wow.
So I get pulled out of the street by these kids who were speaking French, right? No idea. They're just pulling me out of the street. I get put in an ambulance, taken to the hospital. I get a pin in my wrist. I have a broken shoulder, some stitches in my face, in my head. And I'm laying there, and I'm about to get out, and all I'm thinking about was like, how am I going to figure out how to get back to work? Because I need to get back to the bar job so I can make rent. And there was this like moment of pause where I said to myself, like, okay, hold on. That is a lot of craziness that you're thinking right now. You hate everything you're doing. You just get hit by a car, and all you can think about is how do you get back to the thing that you don't want to do, right? So I made a pact with myself just on that part. I said, okay, listen, like if this is the route I'm going to take, then I have to stop pointing fingers at everybody else and just say, okay, listen, like you're choosing chaotic life, accept it, or try to make something else of what you're doing. And it wasn't as magical. The next day was this, magical moment, but over the course of the series in the next couple of days, couple of weeks, couple of months, I slowly started to make better changes. I started to change some of my habits, stop, drinking, being up all night, start getting up early, start having a workout routine, start getting back into a point of just exploring and learning and like just not being so closed and that the world is over mentality. And lo and behold, things started to work in my favor, where went from working behind the bar to owning a bar, owning a restaurant in New York City. I opened and sold a brewery at one point in New York City, then ended up moving to New Jersey to help my dad scale his small construction business, and did that for a series of years, really helped him grow, got him to retirement. It was really, for a bunch of Italians, it was a tense time, but fun time in its own realm before moving into real estate. And my wife, who, was now at the time my girlfriend, we started to do various real estate projects that had success, but they were very us driven, right? We were doing these very us intensive projects where we had to go out there, go meet all the trades, find the deal, go and run to Home Depot, lease the unit, like all these things that required so much of our energy.
Mm.
So we kept looking for another route, and I came upon a podcast like this where someone was talking about buying apartment buildings, right? Buying a whole building where it would have a bunch of people live into it, where they had the opportunity to get cash flow by basically improving the income and optimizing the expenses. And that made a lot of sense to me. So we stopped all the little real estate projects we were doing. We went all in learning about, the big apartment investing journey.
Mhm.
And then in 2015, 2016, dove all into that. And we brought a 94 unit apartment building that was in Kentucky. And we sourced that building, found the whole deal, put it together. And we saw that model. It worked very well for us. And we started to scale it. And since that time, back in 2017, we closed on one to today, we've brought about 3,500 apartment units, about 30 something buildings, valued somewhere in the course of about 320, $330 million of real estate acquired.
Nice, nice. And so, because there's a lot you just shared in there that I'd like to delve into. One is taking, I guess, taking calculated risks and backing yourself. But the other one I want to touch on just before we jump into that is you were mentioning how you didn't like your job. You were riding your bike 10 through Manhattan, 10 streets or 10 blocks and get hit by a car. And then you were thinking about, I need to get back to the job. Um, there was a lot that happened, I guess, leading up to that. Can you put it down to one thing that was like an epiphany, or was it a shock that you needed to realize that there's something better, or you're more capable? And was there some key people around you at that time that helped you through that process? Because I'm going to make an assumption, and I know this is dangerous to make an assumption,
Sure.
but that it wasn't like overnight that it just changed, that you're starting to get up early and do workout routines and everything changed. I'm going to assume that it was a little bit of an evolution, but was there anything specific that was the I guess the driving force, like people, thought process that helped you through that?
Sometimes it's the anti of it, right? Because you can know what you want and you know what you don't want, right? At the time, I was in a relationship, and with the chaos I was bringing to my life, I was choosing bad relationships, right? So I had a girlfriend that was, so angry with me, so upset with me because of where I was, and in this job where I had just gotten hit by this car, she was over the level of where how bad we were together, but we were like stuck of it was like terribleness stuck together, right? So it was that point of just saying, okay, I've created this universe I'm in. So I didn't have anybody pull me out of it. But sometimes what you need is to show what you don't want
Mm,
to lead you to where you do want, right? Because many times you get stuck in this path of like just like searching for what you want, but sometimes you can't find it because it's easier just to eliminate what you don't want.
mm,
And so I figured out like I don't want this relationship anymore. I don't want this job anymore, right? And what happens many times is that it's like the devil is better or safer than the devil you don't, right? Is that even if we don't like something, it feels safer to us, so we won't leave it. We
mm,
will just stay with it, right? Because it feels better, safer, more opportunistic just to stay in a place we don't want to be, because the world out there is so much more dangerous. It's so unknown, and like that's so scary, right? So for us to step outside of ourselves becomes this big unknown. And so we get stuck in this thing that we get stuck for years doing something we don't want. And I was stuck in this part doing something I didn't want, but it was more fearful to step outside of it because of the unknown, right?
mm.
So that gave me the level that it pushed me over the edge to say, well, what do I have to lose at this point?
Yeah.
I go back and get another bartender job and go do whatever. I'm sure I could find another bad relationship if I want another bad relationship. Like they're out there, right? But lo and behold, it helps you form what you don't want that leads you closer to what you do want.
Yeah.
And I find like when you take a step, like typically a couple things can happen. You take a step, it's the absolute wrong way, so you know not to go that way again. You turn around, right?
Yeah.
Or you take a step and it's somewhere going in a direction that's not so bad, but it's not right. So you learn how to pivot to a better direction. Or you take a step and it's great, and now you take it and fuel it to the fire. And what I've always wanted to do during this time is like I wanted something that was like perfect, right? You want like the goal, like, oh, I need this goal and then I'm going to get there tomorrow. But what you find is that the goals you have come along the journey and then they're behind you. It's not like the world stops. So you have to start taking steps because the goals that you start out with are either too small or they no longer are actually part of your journey. But you have to start the journey, right? So for
Yeah.
myself, I was stuck in a spot where I wasn't starting the journey. So when that happened, I had this part of not wanting to go back to this job. I had this girlfriend I really we were at odds, and it was something I had to go away from. And it led me to start trying different things outside of what I was doing because it was different, so different from what I was doing that the only thing it could do is give me at least guidance, but it actually started to give me momentum.
Yeah. And the key thing you're talking about there is you're talking about the hero's journey, pretty much.
It does have a really, when you talk to it, it does give me that part of just guiding, right? And, you know, I'll give back to it. The funny thing that I've come up to with the hero along my journey, right, and my guide, right, as a part is that there was one staple before I met my now wife that was in my life. And I had this bulldog, right? And I had this bulldog with me, and this bulldog followed me on all these paths, right? And it continued to be with me. And it was something that one, it gave me the insurance, right? The dogs are always there with you, right? But then as I started to grow, the bulldog started to grow with me because it not only did it become the name of my brewery, the parent company of the brewery, but it became a name of a restaurant. The dog was like known everywhere. It was like it just started to have his life of its own, but it started to lead me and support me, right? Funny enough, like when I first met my now wife, right? She had come over to meet, with my roommate in this part, and the dog was a puppy at the time.
Yeah.
Before we were together, a couple years before we were together, and the dog ended up peeing on her jacket. So claiming what was his, right? So years ahead of the time. And funny enough, that dog, bulldogs only live to 8 or 9 years old. Jack, he lived to 15 years old,
Wow.
and he followed me through all the tough times, all the way to where now my wife and now we've had our couple of kids all the way through New Jersey, made it all the way to Tennessee, all the way to Tennessee to see us, to get to a home, to see like where we're part. And like, it was like that time where he was like, okay, you're good. Right. And then in that night, he passed away overnight. And it was just like one of those parts where he was such a staple, but he had saw me at my worst,
Yeah.
and he had saw me as things became a life. Right. And he was long, just like dogs are, as part of the whole journey.
Man, and they're so loyal. Then
Mhm.
there's not conditional love. It's all unconditional. And yeah, that's the brilliant. It's a brilliant metaphor, if you like, for support that you can have through your journey, isn't it? It's amazing.
What it is that sometimes we're looking for like our guides, like we're looking for the things and they're right there under your nose and you just don't know. Right. And it's so funny. It's like they're right there all along. And like well, who's gonna mentor me? Where am I gonna get this thing? And like many times, like we're looking so hard. It's that part where we're looking everywhere, but
Yeah,
right where we are. And when you take a moment and just understand what you have, you understand what you need is everything you have. Where we're always looking for like what am I going to read? Like what's the next book, or who am I going to meet, or like what
yeah,
do I have to do just to be able to help me along? Where
yeah.
in fact you have it. You just have to actually take into account that it's actually right in front of you.
And it's recognition, isn't it? And it's probably gratitude for what you do have around you, but also just opening your eyes and being more aware of actually what do I have and who do I have around me
Mm.
that is helping me, that is guiding me, and even when you look at yourself and not comparing yourself to anybody external, you've probably got all the resources you need to be successful, or at least take the first step towards being successful, whatever that means for people. And it reminds me of that book, Acres of Diamonds, where stop looking
Oh,
outside because it's right in your own, literally in your own backyard.
yeah, it's true for the course, right? Is that, so much of life is that like we're always thinking like we're not enough,
Yeah,
right? But the action, right? The action trumps everything. And so like usually, yeah, I was thinking like not enough, not having anything, like not being able to level up, right? Or not being able to compare to others. But when I'm just looking to compare to myself, right? Then things can come together.
yeah,
And so much of us are like we're trying to be something like we're not, when in fact, if you just use what you have, things start to show up.
mm,
But you have to start taking action, right? It's the inaction that keeps you with your feet stuck in cement. But the action, like when you start taking action, like things show up. It's not always perfect, right? I mean, there's a lot of wild cards, a lot of like things that come up in your days and your time that just aren't going to be great.
mm,
But in fact, if you keep pushing through them, like some part, they're going to be behind you, right? It's like the things that I try to look at problems in a couple ways. And like when I look at something that potentially is a problem, I say, well, is this I'm going to remember it in 5 years problem?
Yeah.
And if it's not, then I can really just I can take the weight off it. Okay, let's just get through it, right? If this is something I remember 5 years out, okay, maybe it's going to need more attention. It's going to need a different level of heightened scrutiny, right? But 99% of the time, what seems so urgent, so I'll never get by. Half decade from now, you're never going to recall it.
Yeah.
It's going to be something so beyond you because you've grown so much, you've moved so much forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you're thinking about that, because you then were doing the real estate smaller projects, then you thought, there's probably something bigger here that we could get our teeth stuck into. Now, for many people listening to this, they might be thinking, "Hey, I'm not into real estate, blah blah blah." But that's okay. But the point we want to make here is that you've been going from, I guess, with respect, the smaller scale sort of projects, and then you saw something big that you thought, what could be possible? Now, it would have been easy for you to sit back and say, that's far too big. There's too much risk involved. I think we'll just play it safe and continue to do the incremental improvements in the smaller projects. When you consider the time when you make that big leap for that apartment building, what were some of the, I guess, the 5 year problems versus the 1 year problems versus the 10 year problems that you had to consider? And what was the catalyst that enabled you to take the leap, knowing that, hey, it may not have worked, but you were prepared to take the risk anyway? Because I think there's a great lesson in that.
The thing that goes with like big versus small is that we always assume bigger is more riskier, right? So that's usually the thought. Like if I take a bigger swing, right, it's going to be more risky.
Mm,
But when you break it down into actual, chunk-sized events, right, you can look at both projects and say, where does the risk lie? And so for myself, in terms of a real estate project, right? I was looking at a real estate project that had 4 units, right? So 4 tenants that could come in there and pay, or a real estate project at 100 units. Well,
yeah.
ultimately, people would think, well, 100 units, that's so big. That must be scary. There's so many things that could go wrong, right? But if you break it down, right? So if I have 2 vacant units in a 4 unit, I have 50% of the building occupied. So I have 50% of the tenants, right? I still have all the same expenses, the same costs, the same insurance bills, maintenance bills, all the other parts, right? But I only have half the tenants. Well, I have a 100 unit building and I have 2 vacancies. I have 98 tenants there that
Mm,
can afford to pay the income, to pay the rent, that can cover the expenses, to cover the insurance, cover the mortgage, cover all the pieces of the puzzle, right?
yeah.
Well, if I look at these bigger buildings, right? Now, with the bigger building, the size it is, I can treat it like a business. So I can hire a full-time staff, a full-time team that can work at the building each and every day.
Mm,
So they can take care of things, can keep up things, deal with tenants, right? Where a 4 unit, I don't have enough revenue to have a full team. So it comes back on me. So I'm
yeah.
spread thin because I'm trying to handle a lot of things. And now every time something has to be affixed, I can't have enough revenue to go really hire someone to do it. So I have to maybe do it myself, or I have to go pay through the nose, right? So you start looking at things is that I can gain more value in a larger building. I can get a better loan because lenders look at it as a more safe security, right?
Mm,
Than a smaller deal. I can drive income and moderate expenses more, and I can sell it on a larger scale because it's going to go to a larger, more institutional buyer, right? So you start looking at these things like the opportunity for me to go small and large. It presented that when I put this down, I said, okay, my risk on the bigger one is that ultimately it's the same risk I have on the smaller one, but the opportunities on the smaller one are nowhere near the opportunities on the big one,
mm,
right? And so I started to look at both sides of it and say, okay, if I look at it from a risk reward standpoint, the risks are moderated across both, but the risks actually diminish the larger I go, but the reward gets much bigger on the
yeah.
larger I go.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Because a lot of people will look at that and say, "Oh my God, the risk is far too big," and they wouldn't necessarily think about turning that into a business or think about putting a full-time team in there because they think, "Oh my God, not only do I have to take care of all of those units, I've got to now take care of employees. That comes with a whole lot of other problems." It just comes down to your mindset and how you look at it,
Yeah.
right? Because as you've just articulated, you actually removed a lot of the risk by making a more, I guess, logical decision based on what was workable and what wasn't.
Yeah, and I'll say something that may not sit well with some listeners, but like right now, you may be thinking that way, but you might be the employee filling the role for somebody else who's taking the conservative, judgment call to maximize their gains, using you to help them along the journey, right?
Mm,
And so you just have to transition your mindset is that everybody is part of some system in some capacity,
Yeah.
right? There's someone who created the business you're in today, right? Where you're a part of it. But if
Yeah.
you are a part of it, that's fine if that's a role you desire, right? And you can go and do big things. But if you are
Mm.
looking at it from that side, like there's a certain level where there's another person taking the risk. And if you back out the risk there, you see that they're able to do it. So if they can do it, you most notably can probably do it too
That's
if you
it.
start to set the structure in the right way.
That's it. And of course, it comes down to action as well, which you
Yeah.
talked about before. You've got to take action, otherwise you just got your feet in the concrete. So that led to Yarusi Holdings being created. You now got over $300 million in assets. I also know that because I wanted to touch on your keynote speaking, and I was interested to know that you're also an ultra runner. And looking at your bio, this is a very interesting stat. You get up at 4:32 every morning.
Sometimes you have to break the mold in such a pattern that it stands out, right? But not only to others, but to yourself, right? Because you ever set the alarm for 6 and then you're like, oh, it's 6:05 is okay or 6:10 is okay. Well, I was always that part of like it was always okay to just not do it, right? And so that front came up where I started to set the stage with 4:32, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. I would just get out of bed.
Yeah,
And when you're out of bed, you're out of bed, right? It's that part where there's that 1 second decision in your mind where the alarm goes off to hit the snooze button, right? But if you
yeah,
just get out of bed, you're probably not going to get out of bed and be like, oh, let me just lie back down. You're out, right?
yeah.
So I had to set that stage for myself to get myself and get going because what I found is that my day goes in a lot of ways. Not 99% of my day is not the destination I had for it, but I do set the parameter with my 1% in the morning. I do set a foundation for my morning because it at least gives me the base to be able to be settled and calm and ready for the day when it comes at me in whichever direction it does.
Mm. I was listening to Robin Sharma, who's been talking about the 5
Oh,
a.m.
yeah.
club for years and years and years. And on a recent podcast, he was saying he now gets up at 4 a.m.
Oh, there you go.
And
Yeah.
then he does his journaling and his meditation before he gets stuck into his 5 a.m. opportunities. But yeah, that's fascinating. So what got you into ultra running? Because I'm sure that there's a lot of great principles that you can take from that, but also I'd love to talk about your keynote speaking, but
Sure.
specifically ultra running. And when we're saying ultra, are we talking like ultra marathons, some 24-hour tight running type of things, which I think is just
Yeah.
absolute nuts. But
I've done everything from, a bunch of marathons to 100-mile races. And so it's been in between of those. And 100-mile races typically take like 20 to 22 hours out there. And, I ran the New York Marathon back in 2009. I started doing this because I played, sports growing up, but then you get out into the world and right, I have a very odd schedule, working in all these weird things, right? That I know like friends to play sports with, and they were all too busy, like, getting their life, starting to, make their families. And so I just started running as like something that was a fill-in. But what it did is it started to create calm in my mind. It created that thing that it was something that I don't consider myself a runner. I just run, right? But I started running and it started to set the stage to be part of my life and part of my journey. And I came upon, I think, 2017, I didn't even know an ultra marathon existed. I was just like, oh, I'd done a bunch of marathons. I was like, okay. And then heard this thing, ultra marathon, which is basically anything longer than a marathon
yeah,
length through, unlimited at this point today, but basically longer than a marathon length. So I came upon a race that was a 50-mile race that was in Ithaca, New York. So it was a bunch of mountains. And I was like, I don't know how to train for this. So I'm just going to go there with two goals. I'm going to run the uphills, 'cause I'm really strong on the uphills, and I got to keep my feet dry. Well, I don't look at the courses because I find that doesn't help me. Oh, there's a lot of hills. Oh, there's not a lot of hills. Okay, I just start going, right? Well, third mile in, it's too deep or too steep to run. So you're like hiking up this thing. The
yeah,
fourth mile in is the first of four rivers you got to cross. So I was like, okay, this really equates to how I have to look at life. It's like new rules at times can be no rules. So many times we set rules up for our life, but it keeps us it's so constricted to where we are. So at a
mm,
certain point, you just got to get out there and go. And as you go, figure it out, right? So that led me into doing longer runs. And when I got into the 100-mile race, again, no idea how to train. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to run. Typically, like if you run a marathon, you'll run like one or two 20-mile races, like just runs before the marathon of 26.2 miles, just to like get your mind ready, get your legs ready.
yeah,
Well, for a 100-mile race, I was like, I can't see that you run an 80-mile race a couple weeks before. That doesn't seem right. So what can I do? So I started running 6 miles every single day for months. No matter if it was 0 degrees, 100 degrees, my ear hurt, I was sick, my knee hurt. Every morning I just ran that 6 miles. Some days I'd run long, but like 6 miles was that status, and like some days I would run 20 or 30 or whatever, right? But what I found is when I got to the race, just like our goals, like if I got to the starting line, it was like only 100 miles to go. I'd be like, I might as well give up. I'm never going to get it, right? And
Yeah.
many times we look at our goals like that, like, oh, I want to go, convert 16 sales calls today. Oh, I'm never going to be able to get that. I might as well just not even pick up the phone today, right? Well, what I found is that all I told myself was like, okay, I don't know how to run 100 miles. So let me just run 6 miles and get to the first drink station. So I ran 6 miles and got to the first drink station. I said, okay, let me just run another 6 miles and get to the next aid station. Okay, I did that. Well, let me just run another 6 miles and I'll get to the hill. Okay, I did that. And at a certain point, 40, 50 miles in, it's getting tough. I'm like, oh, do I stop? Well, let me just run another 6 miles. When I get there, if I've had enough, then we could talk about it then. So I got there, I'm good. So I go to the next one. And at a certain time, maybe it was 500 feet. Let me just run another 200 feet through the tunnel, or let me run another 300 feet across the bridge, or let me just hit that next aid station. And okay, let's just get to that next stop and to see where you are, right? And lo and behold, I'm at 100 miles accomplished over a series of 6 mile runs that I created one step at a time. And what I found that equates to the world of entrepreneurship is that you just have to keep going. Get to the next thing and you'll solve it when you get there. If you stop, it's over, right? You've done, but you can go farther. So don't stop when you want. Stop when you get to the next part and ask yourself that point, like, do I need to stop now? And the answer is going to be no, because you've pushed through it.
Mm.
And most of the adversity we come, if we push through it, it's on the other side of us. But we just have to push through it. And we decide to stop so many times because that seems to be the easy thing, that if you just took two more steps, it would be behind you.
Yeah.
And that's what that really started to set in my mind, a 100 mile mindset of how to go through my day and go through the world I live in, is that just keep going to the next aid station and the answer will be there, but you just have to get there.
Mm. I love that because it reminds me of that. I think Napoleon Hill wrote a little bit of a book called, as well as Think and Grow Rich. I think it was he that wrote 3 Feet from Gold
Hmm.
or something along the lines of that, which is a great metaphor, which for exactly what you're talking about, that too many people give up so close to a breakthrough that they'll never actually experience the breakthrough because they gave up.
Yeah.
And it's so easy for us, whether it's on a sales call, whether you're looking at the year ahead or the month ahead, and you think, my God, that mountain is so huge. How can I ever get up that mountain? Well, you don't actually need to get up the mountain straight away. It's a
Hmm.
process and it'll take you time. So you need to have some tenacity, you got to have some persistence, and you got to have some patience. But if you just break it down into those 6 mile runs or the 500 feet run, if you can get to that next destination, you can now see closer, or that mountain becomes a little bit closer. So you just break it down into bite-sized chunks.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
it's such a pragmatic way of doing it, but it's interesting, isn't it, that a lot of people, even with that logically in their brain, they'll still find a way to give up. They'll
Well, we
still find a
want the
way to stop.
results, but we forget, like, the results are a series of the actions and the tasks. And you can control the actions and the tasks, right? Like you could pick up the phone right now and call a rep. They may say, like, I don't like your business, right? And you put it down and you pick up the phone again, right? And do that, right? You do that enough and you continue to tailor your message and continue to talk, understand your avatar, understand who you're talking to, understand how to answer rebuttals, right? You keep doing that and keep reframing, keep training your mind. You're going to continue to get more and more successes. Where in the beginning, like, I found we've raised a lot of money for investors now, right? And I found in the beginning, it was all about me talking, right? Where I started to learn very quickly that it had nothing to do with me. It had me understanding the client, understanding how I could serve them. And what happened? I started to be a lot more effective at raising capital
Mm,
because ultimately I started to help them instead of saying, "Hey, take this." It was like, "Let me. How can I help you?" Right? And that presentation gave them the opportunity to explore what we had to see it was a viable fit for them.
mm,
And it took where it was 1 in 10, then it became 1 in 5, then it became 1 in 3, right? And it gets smaller and smaller in terms of success we have raising capital because we've learned how to be more proficient in what we're doing, but also serve the role better. But
yeah.
I wouldn't have learned that if I didn't do the reps.
Yeah, yeah. And with that, you've got to have, because I love you to talk about having like a purpose or a reason as to why you're doing it. Because you mentioned before that when you're in the bar job, you didn't really like what you're doing. And
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of statistics that talk about around the world, around about 80% of people don't love what they do, right? So that kind of says to me that they're probably lacking purpose. how important is purpose from your perspective in being able to push through those 500-foot barriers and continuing to go?
Well, as you get bigger and bigger, one of the good things is that there's responsibility with having employees, but there's responsibility with having employees, right?
Mm,
And so now I employ family members, right? I have other people. So I am an integral part in helping them form their journey in their life and have their success, right? Because of the business we've created, right? So the purpose now is that we're creating a business that not only helps the people we have in our team, right? We buy buildings, we make them better places to live, right? Some of the buildings we have here in this town, we took them over and they were not great places to live, right? I had, some of my kids with me, they go out there and they see this, and now they go and they're all brightened up. They look nice. They have a playground. There's kids playing outside, and they can see it as like a place to live. And
yeah,
when I explain it to my kids, I say, part of what we're doing is we're creating a better environment for someone who doesn't have it like you do, right?
yeah.
And so today they are struggling, and now they're struggling living in a place that they don't really like. But now we come back and we can create this into a better place for them to live,
Mm,
where they can feel happy about it and they can go play outside like you do, and they can experience the world, right? And when you look at that, it gives you purpose to the moment, because you realize that the impact we have is not only just, me, like, oh, let me have my success, is now it filters through. Because when I do that and it sets purpose, it helps our employees again live better, but then they do a better job, right? And I see them flourish, right? And then it carries on to the other projects we have and it continues forward.
it's the great example of servitude, and how do you create environments where others can have a better life or a better experience
Yeah.
and not make it about you. And but through that process, because of that, you're attracting more and more success and more opportunities, with
You
which
know,
comes with it more responsibility.
yeah, all responsibility is always there, right? And but it's one we want to bear, right? I was talking to a new friend the other day, and he was some of the kids playing with my kids, and he asked what we did. I was explaining what we did. He said, oh, it sounds very stressful, and I was like, but it's induced stress, right? It's
Yeah.
not stress that's come on me because I've been in the car wreck or other stuff. It's the path we've taken, but I found that the stress of entrepreneurship, as you continue to go through it, the things you're dealing with become less stressful. You're more disciplined to it. You're more understanding to it, and you're more controlled
Yeah.
in the process, because you understand this is what you've chosen to do.
Mm,
Where people can get disrupted is that if they're running from one fire to the next, not understanding that the fires aren't real fires, they're making
yeah.
them into fires,
Yeah.
right? And all you have to do is stop, and the fire stop. But you're creating the fires, right? You're creating the environment you live in, when all you have to do is stop. But we get so stuck in what we're doing that we're like, I equate it to a waiter who's like carrying like 50 plates, but only have three of them have a meal on it, right? But like that, but they're so stuck that I got to carry these plates, right? But only three of them have purpose.
Yeah.
And in our lives, we get in this role where we're carrying all these things that really don't help us in any way, but
Yeah.
we feel like we have to keep going. We feel like we have to go out. We feel like we can't, drop them. But when we realize when we drop them, we only have to really hold on to the three, because that's what really has meaning and where we need to go.
And so just on that, because I'm thinking as you're talking, there's a lot of people out there that almost have the scattergun approach to success, whether it be entrepreneurship, selling, business, whatever the case might be. Um, how important for you, looking back now, and you're by no means at the end of your journey, but how important is the focus and staying the course and being really clear on what you're trying to achieve, so that you can, when you look at a day, because you said sometimes when you wake up in the day, the destination that you actually achieve in the day may be different to what you thought it was going to be. So you've got to be flexible. How important is for you um, the level of focus, so you can stay on the right course, so you know what plate to focus on and you let the other ones sort of fall?
You know, what is it? The Warren Buffett says this great thing. Write down like the 20 things that are so more important to you, right, into your life. And then he says from there, and I'm paraphrasing in a poor way, of course, here, but he says, now of those 20 things, circle the five most important, right? And then on that front, he says, okay, now you're circling cross out the other 15 and never look at them again, because the five are the only ones you need to do, right?
Yeah.
And we talk, there's so much time in like diversification, but there's only so much of our time.
Mm,
And you never see someone who's massively gifted in a business that has tremendous success have 15 businesses going at once. They make one that really goes, really starts to carry the weight, really sets them up. Then things start to go from there. I mean, you
yeah.
look at anything. Like look at anything out there, like Coca-Cola, Amazon, like all of these big businesses that started in one chain. And
Mm.
then as they grew scale, right? And now they've really started to get a process and really to start to create success, then they were able to branch off to do other pieces, right?
Yeah.
So when I was doing all these different forms of real estate, I was having ho-hum success, right? But when I stopped all that and I put the blinders on, I focused just on apartment buildings, all of my energy and focus then allowed me to catapult forward to have massive success in apartment buildings.
Mm.
Now that I've done that, now we've created a property management company that serves about 550 of our units. Now we've created two HVAC businesses, right? That now go along that help and serve our businesses. But if I was trying to do all that at once, I would have fallen flat because I wouldn't have the systems, the processes, the competence, how to do me
Yeah.
because I'm trying to do it all at once.
Yeah.
And so when I got one down, then it naturally presented the other opportunities because now they were in my purview.
Yeah. Love it. And when because as you were talking about that, the next thing is like keynotes. So you now do keynotes. When did that come about in your process?
2018, 2019, I started getting asked to speak a lot on real estate, especially what we were doing because of just the scale we started doing, the direction we started. But what really came into it was that the discipline, the mentality, the leadership, right? That really started to stand out from what I was speaking about because that's what most people need. Because I can say here's the 12 steps. Do this today, right? Here, you do this, and I promise you, if you're patient, you will have the success. I've seen it 100 times. You just do this. But what will happen is that the first step is just understanding the mindset and building the mindset. And if you can't start to discipline your mind to the steps and discipline your mind to the patterns and to just taking action, then the other 11 don't matter.
Mm.
And you can't even get to number two because you're so stuck in your mind.
Yeah.
So we had to help people start to build their foundation, right? So I worked on the Live 100 program, which really just came down to what I was doing. That I just went back and looked at my process and said, what did I do? Well, I broke habits that didn't serve me.
Yeah.
I started to build a process and I started to magnify the results, right? Because when I did that, it started to give me momentum forward to get where I was today. And within there, it led me to begin that I had to be self-aware about, how I was showing up because, I was showing up in a poor way, right? When I was working behind the bar, I was mad at everybody. It was like, I was guilty. I was envious. I just, it was no longer of someone who was helpful, right? I wasn't kind. I wasn't self-serving, right? I was all these things that weren't me. And
Mm.
I had to own it. I said, okay, that's who you are. So it's either who you are or you got to change it, right? So I owned it and I started to position myself for greatness so I could start to, master meaningful habits and rituals that could start to accelerate my growth. Then learning to be uncomfortably brave to just stepping outside of myself. And that's usually a big piece is that we start to take momentum, but then something comes out that's so uncomfortable that we just revert back to where we are, right? So I'd be uncomfortable, brave to my circumstances, right? And that allowed me to just continue to just propel forward to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. And when you help people through this journey, it shows what I find the most fulfillment is that we look at something of an issue or something in front of them that looks like Mount Everest, right? And we get over it, right? And it's the thing they'll never get through, and ever. It just they've been stuck on it, and we get past it. And 2 or 3 months go down, and they can't even remember it, or it's a speed bump now
Yeah.
in their journey because now they're on to the next Mount Everest, right? Now
Yeah.
we're in front of there, but that next Mount Everest is way up the peak, right? So what I find so much in the journey is that we just have to work together to continue pushing through.
Yeah.
And when we understand that the goals don't define us. It's not like if you want to make $1 million. If you make $1 million tomorrow, life doesn't stop. But in
Yeah.
our mind, if I just made $1 million, I'd be set. But
Yeah.
life doesn't stop. It's not like, okay, pause and like life's over, right? It keeps going. So you have to understand like these are just mile markers you're going to keep putting out there as you go forward with your journey. And if you can have just the patience and the discipline and the determination, what you want will show up. You just have to keep going to it.
It's like Jim Rohn always used to say that it's the journey towards success and the person you become in the process, not the destination. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. Who could say it better than that, right?
He's a
Yep.
very wise man, very wise man. So, the Live 100. When I was reading that and looking at that, uh, is that a metaphor for living a longer life, or is it a
No,
metaphor for getting the best out of and maximizing your potential?
the best out of, right?
Yeah,
I find that if you're happier and you're healthier, you're gonna live a longer life.
yeah,
However, it's made to live to your full potential because many times, whether you're in your faith, your finances, your fitness, right, your family, one of them might be doing good, maybe two, but typically there's some things that are lacking in your life. And there's some reasons, right? There's something behind the curtain that's holding you back to continue to carry forward.
yeah,
And what we want is we want people to accelerate forward because, if you come here, you give me value, right? I learn from that and I go from that part and I give the next person value. Like we're all in a better spot.
mm,
But right now, there's a lot of us out there are just not showing up to our greatest capacity, right? And we're not adding to society. We're not adding value out there. And where in fact, if we just look forward and look upon ourselves and understand that we have to improve ourselves first
yeah,
before anything can get better on the outside.
yeah,
And when we start putting that work in, you improve, right? That's
yeah,
the only way to go. He's like, you are going to improve. We just need you. We need you to show up.
absolutely. And it's like Adam Grant talks about, there are a lot of takers out there, but there's also a lot of givers. Be a giver.
Yeah.
Love it.
It's it's a hard world to be the giver because we think that we need to take to get, right? But you really need to give to get. And when you can put that back in your mind that like no one owes you anything. If
No.
you go out there and you give forward, you will find more things will show up that you will never, ever, ever expect.
Yeah.
But if you're constantly out there taking, right, and you're, it's like if you, like crops, like you're out there, you've taken all the crops, right, but you didn't plant any seeds, and you're like, well, and then next harvest, you're like, where is everything? Like where is it? Where's it? Well, you've taken without actually replenishing or giving back, right? So you have to put in the effort to give out there.
Yeah.
And if you are lost right now and you're saying like, well, I just don't know where to start, like go do anything of service,
Mm.
right? Go help in your church, go help in a food pantry, go, read your children, go do something out there that gets you outside of your head of me,
Yeah.
that just gives to others, and you will find something will open up for you.
It is such a powerful concept. What is fascinating is this is a gross generalization. The vast majority of people out there think about it as a transaction. I'm happy to go and give,
Hmm.
but what do I get? What do I get
Yeah.
in return? Oh, no, I've got to get taken care of first. So
Yep.
no, and I say this to leaders all the time, just go and give. The
Yeah.
purpose of you being a leader is to give without any expectation of anything in return. And if you do
You
that
find when you do
constantly,
that, like people say, like, why I owe you? I was like, no,
no,
no, we don't need this. Like, it doesn't have everything doesn't have to have some recourse to it,
no,
right? It's like I can go do something nice for you without you needing to do something for me,
100%.
right? And like and you can understand it too when people do something nice for you. Like it doesn't mean like you have to like do this thing where like you have to like I have this IOU written down. Like go out there to help forward. And if they helped you, go help the next person, right? It's like that weird series where you see people like in line for coffee or like everybody's paying for the next drink, right? It's like that thing where like, like it has a purpose, right? But that's how we have to keep our mentality, right? Someone started that. So why not you? Why not you be the person that starts forward to help others that can help the next person, the next person, and the next person forward?
Exactly. Love it. And it's such a powerful principle. When you just think about Christmas time and any time where you're giving gifts, most people get more satisfaction out of giving the gift than they receive when they get the gift. So
Yeah, it's
there'll be
true. There's
something.
something in the brain. There was a study, and I don't recall exactly what it was, but like the energy in the brain, right? Or like I just it drew more energy in
Mm.
in a good way, right? When you were giving instead of getting,
Yeah,
right? It's just the
absolutely.
feeling overall.
Now there's a framework that you've got on your podcast, sorry, on your website that talks about I think it's called, is it the Akato or Kato?
Kato.
The Ocado framework. I love this because it says unleashing your potential for growth and transformation.
Yeah.
My company name is Potential Unleashed.
Oh, no way. I like it.
Yes.
Yeah. You
So
know,
can you take us through the Ocado framework?
Sure. So that actually, I had a friend. I was talking about the Live 100, and he just came up with Akato, and Akato is 100 in Greek, right? And he just came out of nowhere, and I was like, how interesting of a word, right? Because we talked about my bulldog earlier. That was when I think of like Akato, like 100, like this like Greek statue. I had this statue of the bulldog, my bulldog Jack, that was in our one restaurant, right? So I always think of that statue, right? But I look at Akato, and Akato just has this part of that we have to energize, to gain knowledge, to awaken, to transform, to optimize, right? And when you think through that, right, the energy is the action. And so we have to take action, right? And that action is for us to seek further knowledge, because that knowledge is what we need to continue to carry us forward. But it's going to awaken us to the possibilities out there. Usually we sit there and we sit in our hands and we're like, I just wonder why I can't get a break, or I wonder why nothing's going my way. But when you start to take the physical action to gain the knowledge, to be awakened to the opportunities, the experiences, transforms you.
Mm.
It transforms you to who you are meant to be, and then allows you to optimize the highest results of you and your calling. Where in fact, if you just stay where you are, right, you understand if there's no action, there's going to be no results, right? That's just the simple fact right here. But the action itself produces you into who you want to be,
Mm.
as long as you continue to carry forward in a positive manner.
And with that, how important then is it to have the right people around you to give you feedback, to give you support, guidance? Because I'm sure there's people sitting there thinking, yeah, that sounds great. That sounds awesome, Jason. I take action all the time, but I'm not getting the results.
Hmm.
Now, I tend to think that that might be more of a transactional mindset to thinking, well, coming back to I need to do something in order to receive something, or I want something, therefore I'll do something, versus just take the action. Take the action, build the momentum, and you'll learn through that process. How
So I
important
have
then is to
young
have the
I
people
have
around
young
you?
kids, right? And
Yeah.
I have my son just turned 10, and I was around a friend the other day who saw my son, and he had seen him like 6 months ago, and he's like, "Oh, he just grew a foot," right? And I look at that and I was like, "Oh, like I'm with them all the day, right?" So the level of growth is not, I know he's growing, but not to the height, right? And
Yeah.
so for ourselves, like when you're taking action with yourself all day, you can't realize the momentum and just the positivity and all the gains you're making, because you're not giving yourself your credit, and you can't realize these incremental, right? It's like, if you start working out today and then tomorrow and the next day, right? 20 days in, there might not be much change. Like 30
Mm.
days, not much more, right? It's like, but 6 months in, 7 months in, you see massive change, but it's even from a day to day, it's not that much, because you can't recall how far you are from it,
Mm.
right? So it's you ever heard the story of the Chinese bamboo tree?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like like it's a tree that you actually put the seeds in the ground. You have to water for almost 5 years, right? And over the course of time, you have to actively water it, and then over the course, after 5 years, over the course of 3 months, it grows to monumental heights, 100 feet in the air. But most of us, we plant the seeds and we say, oh, nothing's grown tomorrow, and you give up, and you're off into the journey of something else. You say, ah, it must not have been for me, right? So do you want to have people around you that are positive in part? Yes, some of us aren't that lucky, but what you can do here is, again, you can get back to the beginning. You can look at what you don't want as the anti, and then use that to the opposite effect, right? I look at it to part as like who you're taking advice from. If I'm taking advice from, someone who's never started a business, not gone out there in part, and they've worked a job, all their life, and they're talking to me about how to start a business, I probably don't want to seek their advice, but maybe they teach me some things that would be valuable in what they're doing right now that I shouldn't do as starting a business. But with the world of podcasts, with the world of community groups, with all these parts, you can find your tribe.
Mm.
You just have to step outside your box and start looking for other people that are active in what you're doing and get engaged.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Such a powerful thought process, because when you're talking about the Chinese bamboo tree, I see it in sales all the time, that and particularly sales leaders unfortunately are responsible for a lot of this as well. When their sales teams are not getting the instantaneous results, it's almost like make more calls or go and change your strategy, and they'll have the strategy of the week or the strategy of the month, versus no, know who our ideal customer is, stay the course, have the conversations, build the knowledge, and through that process, you have patience. You'll actually more times than not have the breakthrough. And when you do, it'll be the exponential up curve. Um, but you got to stay the course. You got to stay the journey.
Yeah, I was reading this thing on Warren Buffett, and they were talking about a person who just like modeled his exact replica called Pombre. And the through line was that, the power is not in the activity of the trading. The power is the discipline to not make any action, right? Because if you're not making any action, right, you're not making, and you can sit there and potentially not make any trades for maybe 1 year or 2 years until you make the one, because you
Mm,
know that one is so dialed in because you've done all the research that you go in on.
mm,
But the hardest thing to do is just understand the process and say, my process is to sit here and read and learn and engage and bring in information to just truly understand the market I'm in.
mm,
So to not just choose opportunities that there are wild cards that maybe or maybe not work, but over the course of 9 months, 2 years, 3 years, when that opportunity comes that I have trained for and I'm
Yeah.
prepared for, and I now have put in the work to understand when that shows up and the risk of losing is so far beneath the opportunity to win, I go all in. And that's what happens with us, is that we give up so easy and we just go back to this transient nature, just jumping from one diet to the next diet or to the next thing to the next thing, or just trying this new job or this new, get rich scheme, instead of just being patient with what you're doing
Yeah.
and allowing it to manifest.
But Jason, on the person out there listening to this is like, yeah, but there's so much information available, Jason. Life's too short. I want to make sure I guarantee success. I'm going to look for all the shiny things I could possibly find. I'm going to try them all, mate.
Yeah. You just don't have enough time to. And you're building a life that you want to be able to enjoy the life too.
Yeah.
And with that, if you have all these things you're trying, then you're actually never really doing.
Yeah.
You don't need them all. You just need one. It's like, yeah, like what is it? Like you can't do everything, but you can do anything if you put your mind to it, right?
Yeah.
And the opportunity is that you have to pick something to do.
Yeah.
And there's other things like I could be successful in too if I went out there and tried it, but if I was trying to do them all at the same time, I would not be successful.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what do you like doing? And go all in.
Yeah.
Because you will find success in that. And trust me, there are going to be things that sound great, but everything sounds great online.
Yeah.
Right. And so what you need to understand is that you have one life to live. You're doing this not to live for the job, right? But the job gives you the opportunity to live a life. So whatever you're going to do to make money, let it make money for you.
Yeah.
Then go live your life.
Yeah. It's great advice. It's great advice, mate. As we wrap this up, I'm conscious of time, given it's evening in Tennessee. For people listening to this who maybe have got some challenges that are happening in their business or in their life, they've got multiple different choices that they're trying to decide with, based on the work that you've done in your own journey, but also the people that you work with, what's one thing that you could leave them with that can, I guess, be the catalyst for at least taking a step forward?
You're not alone in these challenges. And the more you can continue to just look at your challenge as an opportunity to grow through, so the next time you go through this, you're in a complete better position to take it on. And it might be horrible right now. It could be everything, like bankruptcy at our parts, but whatever you're going through right now is going to make you more valuable in the long run. Just got to keep your head on straight and keep positive in the steps ahead.
Love it. Love it. Brilliant. Hey, really love this conversation. For people who are listening, want to know more about you and the work that you're doing, but also connect with you personally, where's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me. So you mentioned the Live 100 program. There's the Live 100 podcast, LIVE 100, number 100 podcast with Jason Yarusi, or go over to jasonyarusi.com.
Brilliant. I'll put those in the show notes and people can check that out. So always looking for more podcasts to listen to. So I'm going to add that to my listening list.
Perfect. They're real quick hits. They're like 6 to 10 minutes. So I get in, I get out, right? So we'll dive into it, try to give the piece, comes out twice a week. So you'll be able to knock into a couple of them pretty quick there.
Brilliant. Love it. Jason, absolute pleasure having you on the podcast, mate. And yeah, all the best with your continued entrepreneurial endeavors.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Good on you, mate. Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.